Well, hello guys, it's Jen here, and welcome to the first ever 10,000 Homes podcast. This year at 10,000 Homes, we're celebrating 19 years, which is so crazy to me. I don't think when we started this in 2005 that we even conceived that it would still be going 19 years later, much less that it would have the impact that it's had. And so we're celebrating this month. We're celebrating by telling 19 stories of 10,000 Homes history, of the impact, the home builds, the feeding programs, everything. And as I started thinking about some of the origin stories of 10,000 Homes, I had this idea to do a series of 3 podcasts because I don't think that you can adequately convey the heart of the story through just writing it down. And so we're telling them, we're telling the impact that it had on us in those beginning days and what prompted us to start 10,000 Homes. So I hope you enjoyed this first one where we talk about our very first trip ever to South Africa. Jeremy and I are here, and we're doing a series of podcasts on the 10,000 Homes origin stories. And today we have a very special guest with us. Christine Vicknair is here. Hey, Christine.
Hi.
And I'm super excited about this because today we're going to talk about, it's like the OG of origin stories. Like this is like the original origin story because the 3 of us, 24 years ago, July of 2000, we led a team of, I think it was 22 people.
I don't remember how many.
I think it was 25 with all of us. So
Yeah. So a group of young people we led to White River, South Africa. And we went for a month. And I was trying to remember everything we did on that trip. We did clown ministry. We worked in schools with all kids of all ages. We did home-based care. We built toilets. We did a lot of stuff. And we're going to talk about all of that today. But we've kind of had to dig back in the memory archives because it was a long time ago. And I realized there's a lot of stories from that trip and a lot of fun moments from that trip. Do you guys remember any of those fun moments?
I'm sure. One of the things is this when you want me to tell it?
The fun moment?
Yeah. Is this
yeah,
what this
go
is?
for
Okay.
it.
All right. I just want to make sure. I think the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is we stayed with all 22 of us. We stayed on the campus of a Bible college there, just outside of White River, South Africa, and some of the students, we made friends with a lot of students. And one of the things I remember is we would stay in our rooms at night playing games and things. And I remember one night we heard some noises outside. Do y'all remember this?
Yes, I do remember.
We were outside, or we were inside playing, I think, Settlers. And we heard some like roaring or some kind of weird noises. And we were like, what is going on? And it went on for a little bit, and then I remember going outside. It was dark out, and there was like a little dirt road that went right in front of our rooms where we were. And I remember seeing this guy coming, and he was like yelling help or something. I don't remember all the details of it, but I just remember like, what is wrong with him? He's like walking funny, like limping and stuff. And we get over, and he's got like a bone sticking out of his shirt with, like, looked like a white T-shirt.
Gnarly. It was gnarly.
It was gnarly, yes.
And bloody.
It looked like blood everywhere.
Yep.
And we ran over, like, to help, like, what the heck? And we thought, and he says, I've been attacked by a lion. And us green, white Americans were like, what the heck? This is our first time in South Africa. And anyways, yeah, we get over there, and then as we start to try to help him, or he jumps up and says, "Hi, just kidding," and he had like a tape of lion noises playing. That's what we were hearing, right? The
like
roars.
From a boom box.
From a boombox or something. Yeah. So that was a fun story.
Yeah. And that's exactly why they did it, because we freaked out and we were like they were running over.
They played a good trick on us.
Yeah.
They got the response they wanted.
Yes, they did.
Exactly.
They did.
Yeah, that was a funny story. Yeah, I remember one day after church, Christine, you and I were standing outside and we were watching this lady. She had picked up this huge cow patty, and during that time, a lot of people would get
What is a cow patty?
Like cow manure.
Oh.
And it was a big one, and people would get those and they would use them to make their floors because they could pack it really hard. Mm-hmm. And so she must have found like a really good fresh one. And she picked it up, and we were standing there, and Christine the whole time was like, it was like you were commentating, like, oh no, she's going to walk over here and she's going to want to shake my hand. And
I was a little nervous about germs and such and things. Yes, I was.
Yeah. And so Christine's commentating. I'm watching this lady walk directly toward us. And sure enough, she switched the cow patty to the other hand. And did she grab your hand?
Yes.
Yeah.
To shake my hand and be close. And so I shook her hand after the switched cow patty.
Yeah.
All was fine.
Yeah.
I was well.
The thing that I thought was funny was that you were the one nervous about it.
And so she came
and
to
she
me.
shook your hand. She didn't shake my hand.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Yeah.
Great.
That's funny. Yeah. Christine, do you have any stories?
I think that was it. There was just funny times. You said we did clown ministry, and so some of our team was dressed up as clowns, and we'd go to schools and do functions, and there were just some funny moments when we're doing things with the kids, and it's like hundreds of kids at these schools, and all of a sudden the clown has to use the restroom, so they got to run to the outhouse, and you're like, wait, where's this clown going? No, everybody don't follow them, like stay here. But the kids were so excited they'd be following the clowns to the outhouses and the outside toilets. It was funny.
That's funny. Yeah, lots of fun memories from that trip.
I do remember the first time we went, the three of us, our host, this couple that were working there, local South Africans named George and Carolyn. They were such gracious hosts, and they took the three of us into Kruger Park for the first time. And I remember one of my fond memories is they said that they played a game every time they went in, and when you go in right at dawn, right, and that the first person to spot an animal gets an ice cream. And so the two of you took that as a serious challenge.
We're a little competitive.
Yes, yeah. We're like, I'm gonna win this game, and I think it was a giraffe, and I think it was you that saw. I don't remember. Maybe those details.
It was a long time ago, Jeremy.
That's right.
We saw a lot of animals that day, so I don't remember who was first. That was fun.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I remember that day we saw the Big Five, which was
all Big Five that day.
A big deal.
Yeah.
To see
now
all
that
the
we've
Big
been
Five.
back many times, you and I, we know how big a deal that is.
Yeah, that's very rare to see all the Big Five in one day. Yeah. Yeah, so many great memories, and I definitely look back on that time with a lot of fondness, and a lot of there was a lot of fun. In the midst of it, it was an interesting time to go to South Africa. I think all three of us had been to the continent of Africa before.
Yes.
But this was our first time in the Southern Africa region. And so in that time, in 2000, that was 4 years before ARVs, which are antiretrovirals, which is what you have to take when you have HIV to keep yourself alive. So that was 4 years before ARVs were available in Southern Africa, or in Africa. It wasn't until 2004 that those were available. And so at that time, according to a UN AIDS report in 2000, There were over 25 million people infected with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. And that year alone, there were 4 million new infections.
Yeah.
And I think about those numbers and I think, man, that's a lot of people. And, you know, you hear those numbers and you think that's a lot of people. But can you guys describe like what that scene looked like to you? Like so many people infected with HIV, like what did that look like?
I think what first comes to mind is when we would do home-based care, we would work with the home-based care workers. We'd travel to visit people in their homes, and that's where people who were sick and dying were in their huts or homes. And we would travel with them bringing medical supplies and basic medical needs, and you would just see house after house of people just it was even like dark because there weren't windows or just a space and kind of a dark space, just not being able to move. And the nurses coming in, or just people, care workers, weren't even nurses, but just coming in to do whatever medical things they could do to help alleviate pain, help keep people well. And that was really shocking to me, to see people who were in such hard spaces on the floors of their homes, and not much comfort in a sense of what we would know as a hospital or a care center or service. Like, and so it was just, and hearing before we would go out to home-based care, hearing the people who are volunteering, who are going out, just reporting the numbers of new people in their communities who were either diagnosed or sick or died, the number of deaths, and just, it was shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that struck me was the amount of funerals we saw. I guess I remember thinking, like, from a logistical standpoint with it, that because my grandparents owned a funeral home when I was a kid, and I remember that, and I remember them being very busy with funerals and how much work it went into organizing these and doing these, and I remember that these funeral homes were so overwhelmed, and they were doing like dozens of funerals each per day, and I know culturally in that part of the world, among the African population their culture is typically they would have funerals on the weekend, and they wouldn't have them during the weekdays. But I remember during that time our host telling us, no, there's too many funerals to just do them on the weekends, and so 7 days a week they were having funerals all day. And I remember just being struck by that, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this.
That's what I remember, a lot of death and sickness. And I also remember driving through the roads in Missouri, and you would see like these little kids that would just be by themselves, you know, playing outside, and because probably their parents had passed away, or you know, that there's just a lot of despair, a lot of it was a difficult scene to process. And I remember the home-based care a lot, and I remember every morning we would pack like Tylenol and just simple medication, but it was like trying to do whatever we could for these people in their homes to alleviate any kind of pain or anything they were feeling. And it was a tough time for sure.
I do remember a nurse who was with us who was with our team, who was staying there, and I remember when I saw the wound that she was caring for, I was not a medical person, so it was way overwhelming for me to see. And she went on to share, oh, this looks so much better, because she had been caring for him before. And I was just, again, taken back by the intensity.
Yeah, what I remember, just it was intense, and it was quite overwhelming. And I think it was overwhelming, like you're talking about, Christine, about the going in and caring for these wounds and stuff, is that we were not trained in these things, and we didn't have any experience in this. This was quite an exposure, and it was quite a bit of jumping into the deep end. And it was quite a bit. Not quite a bit. It was overwhelming. So, but it was quite a significant time too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it was, that word intense describes it perfectly, because it was super intense. What we were seeing, what we were experiencing. I mean, none of us had ever experienced anything like that before. Jumping in, all of that. And that combined with, I know I can say it was the most difficult team that I've ever led. Would you guys say that?
Yes, I would probably. It was up there.
Yeah. I've led a lot of teams, so, but
yes,
and it was for sure challenging.
Yeah. And sorry to anyone on that team that might be listening to this podcast. But it was difficult. And I mean, one example is, there was a coup happening to overthrow our leadership. And Christine, you and I got wind of where they were having their secret meetings. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And so Christine and I decided to show up to the meeting. And I'll never forget, we walked in and the look of shock on their faces. I'll never forget that look. And we sat down, and I think they didn't know what to do. So they one by one got up and left. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah.
And the two of us were just left sitting there. So that's what I mean by it being a difficult team. And we were very young leaders trying to, process what we were seeing and lead this team there were some challenging moments with it.
And I think too, recognizing, probably now looking back, like these are young adults who are experiencing
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Same, intense feelings, emotions, the spiritual dynamic what do they do with that too? So all of us were
young. We were all young.
All very young.
Yeah. And didn't know how to process the emotions of everything we were seeing.
Totally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all handled it very differently, for sure.
Totally.
And none of us had the experience to even know that was what was happening. You know what I mean? That these actions were a result of the difficulty of what we were processing. But I think despite the difficulty, the emotional difficulty, the difficulty of young leaders trying to lead this group of young people, I can honestly say that trip was the most impactful and fruitful trip that I had been on. In terms of this was the beginning spark that even launched 10,000 Homes. And so even though it was so difficult, there were amazing things that came from that time. What are some of the most impactful moments for you guys from that trip?
Go ahead, Christine. You're great.
I think we worked in, I believe it was Masoi area, and we were our team was building an outside toilet for a family, and seeing, there were two of them actually that we did, and one was for a grandmother that was she was almost completely blind, and she was caring for grandchildren who had been orphaned. Her children had passed, so she's caring for their kids now. And then another was just kids. I think there were 5 kids that were living on their own without parents. And that the oldest was 15 and the youngest was 2. And so being personally up close with these children and working in that area, doing like, manual labor, building, carrying water to mix concrete to build these bricks, and then being in the same community with the kids and seeing what we were working towards and for, just really was shocking for me to know that there are children who did not have anyone caring for them, and some who it was really hard for grandparents or aunts or uncles who were older trying to care for these kids. And there were so many families like this, and the thought of these kids not having a safe place to be or even safe people to be with was really overwhelming for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was intense. I'll never forget the first child-headed home that I went to visit. Yeah, it's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, on that trip, like you said, Jen, that I think you mentioned that it was this trip was very difficult, but it was fruitful. Not just fruitful in the long term of that. It was the spark that led to 10,000 homes, but it was also fruitful in the sense of we felt like the need was great, but we felt like what we were doing was helping. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that goes to the team we worked with there, the local South Africans, and as I mentioned, George and Carolyn were our hosts, and they were incredible, and their passion was quite genuine and quite contagious and inspiring, and so that it was just really cool to see and to work alongside people and to serve people that were doing such meaningful work, mm-hmm. and that they weren't afraid to go and sit with those that were hurting the most, mm-hmm. and to go and sit with those child-headed homes and stuff. And so seeing that was massively impactful for me. But I think the one moment that maybe was the most significant was we took turns with our team of 22 going and staying overnight at a Catholic mission in Barberton and serving there. And we were working. It was 4 sisters, 4 nuns within the Catholic Church there that were serving, and they had 2 primary ministries that they were running. They were doing a number of other things, but the 2 that I remember were they were running hospice care for people dying of HIV-related illnesses, and most of these people that were dying there in their hospice care were people who had no family left, or they had been shunned by their family. They were completely alone, and they wanted to give them a place to come and die. And then they were also, with that, they were running a small little orphanage of about 18 children, I believe. It was around 18 kids that were, all the kids were, I believe, all but one were HIV positive, mm-hmm. From birth, born with HIV. And I remember, for me, there were a couple different moments, but just working there and volunteering there and just doing what I could was a very impactful couple days for me that were quite emotional. And I think one of the most significant ones was, as Jennifer, as you and I stayed up one night caring for, or sitting by the bed, not really doing much, just caring, because we weren't trained and we didn't know what we were doing. I remember playing my guitar, and I remember there was a woman by the name of Sylvia, and we just sat by her bed one night as she was in her last hours of life. And I remember just hearing her story, mm-hmm. and hearing her concern for her children, who was going to care for her children when she died. Hearing, really, she became a human, and one of the most beautiful humans to me, because up until this trip, within my background, which I come very, very proud of where I come from and very grateful for my heritage. But within the culture and within the church culture I grew up in, so many wonderful things. But one of the things that they got wrong a bit was that everyone with HIV got what they deserve. And no one would say those words directly, but there's a bit of a, I don't exactly have the words, but there's just a sense of that. There's a bit of judgment towards it, and I think based in fear of what HIV is and what it was and what it meant. And so I had this paradigm under the surface, didn't really know it. And so being there, sitting with Sylvia in her last hours, trying to give her the most peaceful death that we could. I remember you going and getting wet cloths and changing them out for her. And just hearing her story, she didn't become she was no longer a statistic. She was no longer one of the 4 million that had contracted HIV that year, but she was Sylvia, a mother and a wife and someone who loved her kids, loved her family, and didn't want to leave, and was leaving this earth too soon, and dying a very painful death. And so that was a real moment of brokenness for me, honestly. And I would say that's one of the most seminal moments in my life, was on that trip at that Catholic mission.
It was interesting that you say that part about fear. I think there were some things, even with our team and going in.
Oh yeah,
the unknown.
Yeah.
That there can be a place for fear, but watching people who, one, being educated, and the people we worked with educated our team and ourselves. And it is empowering when we step out, not like encourage to care and not let the fear take.
Yeah, there was a lot of fear, like, oh, can I touch them? I remember in the hospice care, can we touch them? What if body fluids, what spit, saliva? There was a lot of, and even back then, there was a lot less common knowledge around it, wasn't there? That's a good point. I didn't really thought about that.
Yeah, but I remember like seeing the kids and playing with them, and like, I think because then you have a face and it's not just a statistic, and there is that fear, but you also didn't think about it as much because you're like, these are kids, and they just want to play like any other kid, and I know we've talked a lot about how we would play with these kids and play tag with them, and they would get so winded because of the disease, affecting their body, that they would have to stop. And it was not normal for a kid that age to get winded so fast.
Yeah.
And
And there was definitely like empathy or compassion for these, especially the kids and women, and that were there as well, who, like you were saying, it wasn't their choice. It wasn't their actions that, that, and so that was, I remember that being impactful too for those kids who suffered greatly.
Wow.
Yeah, and even some of the adults like Sylvia, I remember hearing her story of the way she contracted the disease it wasn't her fault, she was faithful to her husband, but he wasn't, and that's how she got the disease. And I know I didn't necessarily grow up with the same thinking that you did, Jeremy, but I do remember there was a huge paradigm shift for me as well, thinking of all these people, all these kids that did not deserve this disease and this death it was a difficult death. I mean, I remember sitting with Sylvia and watching her and the pain and it was, I mean, death isn't pleasant in any sense of the word, but it was a very, very painful death that she suffered, and that it wasn't peaceful,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about, is there any particular story for you though?
I mean, I think the time at the hospice care was definitely the most impactful for me. It's not necessarily a specific story, but playing with the kids and sitting with Sylvia that night, there was definitely something that happened in my heart during that time where I just was just so moved and grieved, and just thinking, man, these people did not deserve this, and I just remember thinking there's a lot to do here to care for these kids and these people. But that was a very pivotal moment for me, for sure.
Wow.
That week.
Yeah,
that's good. Any other stories or anything else that you guys want to share from that time?
I'm sure there's a lot of different stories. It was a lot of fun, and I remember some of the characters on the team. Shout out to James. He was a lot of fun, James.
Yeah, he was.
Wherever you are, James, now in life, we will forever remember you as bringing life and energy to it. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. I remember Forrest. There was a guy named Forrest, and he was climbing trees everywhere. I remember that. But yeah. Well, I think this trip was a long time ago, 24 years ago, but it was definitely the beginning of a spark that I know started in you and I, for sure, Jeremy, because it's what prompted us to. It was the beginning of starting 10,000 Homes, really. I mean, it wasn't until 5 years later that we actually, started the organization. But in between those 5 years, I mean, the three of us, we even moved to Connecticut together, and it was, there was a lot going on even during that time of processing this trip and the things that happened in our heart and what we needed to do about those things. Yeah. And so I definitely see that time as the beginning of 10,000 Homes and starting that work. So I wonder though, I have a quick question, because we're doing this podcast is a bit of the OG story for 10,000 Homes, and you and I were two of the three co-founders of 10,000 Homes. But Christine, you were a part of leading that trip with us, and we went other places together, and our friendship goes way back. But you weren't a part of starting 10,000 Homes necessarily. You were our friend and supported us through it. But maybe from this trip in Africa, this trip to South Africa, this one we're talking about, is there anything that you can say that you took with you in your life and what you've been about, and anything?
I mean, I think, like I said, for sure, the things that impacted me the most was these, like, home. Yeah. The place of home for children and to feel safe and belong. And so I have, one within my own home, but caring for families and kids has been a passion, but also within other outreaches and ministries that we've worked with all over the world. Yeah. My heart was with the kids a lot, and those who didn't have that. The thought of not having parents was very impactful. Yeah, that's cool. And just raised, I have great parents. And so it just opened my eyes to see the world through a different lens of, there's such need. Yeah, all over, not just in Africa at the time, but all over and here. So.
You do have great parents. Yeah. And really another question I thought of while you were sharing that was, so we went in July of 2000, 24 years ago was this team that we went. You didn't go back to South Africa for over 15 years, right? And you came and visited us. I don't know what year that was. Was that 2016?
Goodness, I don't remember the year. It's been.
I don't remember the year either.
I think it was.
Remember what we did. But
I think it was around 2016.
Year.
We have photos of
Probably.
it, but I think it was around 2016 you came.
I think so.
How was it going
so.
back after 15 years or more? What can you? I know off.
It was. So I remember, like, looking back before we talked this morning, looking back in my journal of that first outreach and recognizing where we had built in the community where we built the toilet for the kids. I had written down that George, who we were working with, he said that someone from the community, seeing our team come in and people come from another place and care for kids, a woman came from the community and said she wanted to help cook and help cook for the kids who were living in the home by themselves. And he said that was a big deal. And so I lost my train of thought for a second. Oh my goodness.
Going back.
Going back. And so one of the big things from my trip back, we got to go and serve in
Bonswani.
In Bonswani. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the after school program, like the feeding and playing with the kids and seeing all of these kids being fed, and moms from the community loving these kids was like, whoa, okay, this is amazing. This is awesome. And getting to serve in not just one community, but we went to a couple where the kids were being cared for and loved, and women in the community who were loving.
That's so cool.
The kids, and so that was cool. That was a big thing for me to see from the first trip to years later.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that
story.
story.
That means a lot, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It's hard to know how to wrap up this conversation because
I guess you just stop it.
Really
don't you?
Enjoyed talking to you guys, but Christine, I just want to say thank you so much for,
of course,
joining us, and thank you to you and other people that are listening to us talk, because you have been a part of the legacy and the history and the work of 10,000 Homes, and that's something that I know Jeremy and I are so grateful for all these people that have been a part of the journey and the story. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
For reals.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being on the podcast, but thank you for being our friend.
Yeah,
yes.
My pleasure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's been fun.
All right, this is fun. Good job, Jen.
All right. Thanks. And that's a wrap.
All right.